Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Pivoting off this, Phil Knight said something, and I may have said this to you on the air. Phil Knight has a manifesto when he started Nike. He wrote down 10 things. And a lot of this you could see in Air, the movie Air, Ben Affleck. Yep. And number 9 on it was, this will be messy. And one of the real things I talked about today about the WNBA was, we are seeing this moment in time where this league, and I've always said I'm in the omelet business, not the egg business. I don't make you interesting. When you're made, I talk about you. Not my job to make the omelet. I'll report on the omelet. So I didn't talk about the WNBA because, frankly, it didn't get ratings. I mean, Jesus, the finals got 700,000. Now you have a catalyst that explodes. When a business explodes, it could be a tech business, pharmaceutical business. It could be a law firm. When something explodes, shit gets messy. And we're in the messy phase for the WNBA. Their early schedule for the Fever is insane. They're playing twice as many games.
They played, Colin, from previous Friday until Sunday, that 9-day stretch.
Yeah.
They played as many games as the Aces have played all year. It was again, from a marketing standpoint, I got it. Put Caitlin as many places as possible. From the Fever played 11 games, the defending champs have played 6. Now, that maybe that was sneaky brilliant, and then I'll let you finish, I'm sorry, because it will lead to, I think, Caitlin being awesome at the end of the year, because all of a sudden she's going to be the most rested player in every game, because they have no more back-to-backs. They have no more 3 games in 4 nights. So the rest of the year, she's going to have real time in between it. But but go ahead. You were making a point that I interrupted.
So it's just it's an exploding business for the first time. It was, we all know the backstory on the WNBA, that it was subsidized by the NBA for a decade. Now they moved into smaller arenas. It wasn't terribly profitable. Las Vegas has sort of figured it out first to be the first franchise that's making real money, almost has an NI deal with its players. But the point being is, this is an explosion, and you see it in tech all the time. You just it's hard to predict the unpredictable.
And so I think so much of the Caitlin Clark WNBA commentary has actually been some weird media meta commentary about the commentary. Like, it has been the basketball stuff, I think, is pretty straightforward. This is a hell of a rookie class. Cameron Brink is going to be a star. Angel Reese is going to be a star. Caitlin Clark is going to be a superstar, and maybe those other 2 will as well. And they have brought a lot of eyeballs. Caitlin Clark's team seems to really be struggling, probably in part because they had the number 1 pick the last 2 years for a reason, and partially because of this schedule. And is there some predictable jealousy, either just based purely on attention and economics? Is some of it about, this rookie, some hazing? Sure. All that stuff, kind of, to me, is a pretty straightforward sports story, up to and including the foul heard round the world that was just a hard flagrant, not even a flagrant 2. Like, it was a hard foul. But the commentary has really been about the commentary. Yeah. And there's so many levels to it. So I want to start with the first thing you said, which is, thought exercise. Let's say in 5 years, there is a Tiger Woods-like athlete, and some would say, oh, we've already had it. But no, Tiger Woods-esque in that he captures everyone's attention in hockey. Do we then need to go on the air and be like, we are so sorry that we weren't covering hockey before? We did a moral disservice. I don't feel we do. Nope, and so I don't feel, when folks have been like, well, you're new to the party. Like, well, in our specific business, the party just got going. Now, it doesn't mean it was not worth a worthwhile league. It doesn't mean I'm not glad it exists. But on my show, I barely talk about professional baseball. I don't talk anything about hockey. It'd be one thing if on our shows we were talking 11 different sports and just like, nope, we have time for cricket, but we're not making time for the WNBA. That's not the truth. That's not how these shows work. And there has been, to me, an element of what I would compare to the hipster band phenomenon, which is if there is a band that all of a sudden is playing arenas, but a year ago was playing 800-person venues, the folks who were the fan of the band then sometimes are like, oh, I was here before it was popular, and they're almost snarky towards the new people, as opposed to being like, hey, I always knew this was awesome. Glad you're here now. So I don't love that. And I think that is problematic on one direction from a media perspective. Here's another thing I think is problematic from a media perspective in the other direction. Folks who clearly have the attitude of, you should be happy I'm even talking about your sport. Therefore, none of my opinions are open for criticism because you're just lucky to be getting my opinions. I think that's bullshit too. And I think if it were hockey or if it were the MLS, I think people would have an easier time with it because there is the gender aspect of it. People are nervous about how we talk about it. And then add to it that there is also a very obvious, now we can talk about how significant, but an obvious at least component of a racial component, which is it is odd that this league that is majority black, a disproportionate amount of its stars have been white women throughout history, and now its biggest star is a white woman. That is an added landmine or complication, whatever you want to put it. And I think because people are so afraid of all of this, everyone's just freaking out and losing their mind about a foul and who's talking what. And all of a sudden now the WNBA, without anyone mentioning, hey, the Connecticut Sun are undefeated, is taking up more airtime than it has in the last 5 years combined. It's a fascinating media story as much as anything.
I thought James Jones, who's been watching the WNBA for years, had the most prescient point on it. I thought it was really smart. I didn't think about this. He says the biggest difference between the NBA and the WNBA is the NBA is much more vertical. You may occasionally have a woman break away in the WNBA and dunk it. Men go through the lane, jump over other men, and jam it, often behind their head. Both leagues can shoot. Both leagues can move their feet. Both leagues can rebound. Both leagues can pass. The NBA, men jump over other 6'8" men and dunk it in their face regularly. He said because of that, the WNBA is more physical. You score through physical, banging, body. You don't go over. You go into. He said,
oh, that's fascinating. I hadn't thought about that.
Fascinating. He said the WNBA is actually more physical than the NBA. The NBA is no hand check. You can't stay in front of anybody. The bigs all shoot threes. The lane's wide open. That's not the WNBA. You score bully ball. And he said, so if you watch the WNBA for years, it's way more physical than the NBA.
So that's fascinating.
Fascinating.
So I hadn't even thought about, so
same.
Because it's a great point by James. So I considered myself like I was in tune enough prior to Caitlin Clark with the WNBA to make a significant wager before last season on the Aces to repeat. Because I'm like, oh, they're the best team, Asia Wilson. I am not in tune enough to tell you who the All-Stars were. You know what I mean? Right. So I was a casual observer of the league, which I think makes me above average for, America, but below average for the diehards, because there's a level of the other aspect is it almost feels like Americans who are fans of like the EPL, your English Premier League, there is where there's almost don't love casuals and casual fans. And I feel like the WNBA for its first time maybe in its existence, is experiencing casual fans. And so that was the other thing that I thought was so fascinating about some of the coverage of the Angel quote from yesterday. So the internet aggregators did do something unfair to Angel Reese. She gave a long, thoughtful answer, and they cut it right when she said, basically when she said, this is because of me too. Yeah. And then right after that, she then talks about her teammate and other women.
Yeah.
But they cut it to where it just sounded like that. But now there's a whole nother group of people who aren't used to internet aggregators doing stuff that they've done to every athlete. It sucks. It's unfair. And they thought Angel Reese was getting unfairly picked on. It's like, nope, actually, all those accounts do that to everybody. Okay, they do it to Kyrie, do it to Aaron Rodgers. They do it to anyone who they can because they're just trafficking clicks. And it's a lot of, to me, like, almost like very, what's the word? Communities online that don't interact with each other, who all of a sudden are getting put in the same chat room. And everyone's just yelling at each other. And everyone's mad. And we don't even really, and there are a lot of real things going on about it. Now, like you said about the tech space and about growing, I actually think all of this is going to be good for the league, for everybody. We're getting all of this shit out of the way early.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to the, the part of the season after the women's Olympics or after the Olympics, the women's basketball team plays, everyone's going to kind of know the rules of engagement, who's good, from a player perspective, who's bad, what teams are good, and people are into it. And they do have a nice built-in time of year for their sport to be going on. Because we got a maximum of 7 NBA games left, and then we are into the real dead time, and people care what Angel Reese does, and they care what Caitlin does. And then people are going to, by definition, care about what the best teams and Asia Wilson and those people do. And so I think it's great. I think it is like having, for me, right now while I'm talking to you, on the screen right behind the camera, is the Royals-Guardians game. Because for the first time in 8 years, I'm watching every baseball game the Royals play, because for the first time in 8 years, they're competitive. And for me, it's like, oh, cool. Like, I have a new thing that I care about, because I only am a diehard baseball fan when my hometown team's good, which if you're a Royals fan is about once every 15 years. And so I go long stretches where I only watch big games of the playoffs, but it's fun to have something new. It's fun to have a new thing to be into, and that's how I feel about the WNBA.
Yeah, May through September. Now, they play their championship in football season, but I think I've told you this before. I'm pretty selfish on that, is that I literally know exactly when my vacations are every year. I know I'm going to work 6.5 months football, take a week off, come back for March Madness, NFL free agency, take a couple Fridays off, do the NFL draft, take another Friday off, do like 6 to 7 weeks of hard NBA. And then I've got like 2 months, 10 weeks of, oh shit, what do I do?
Yeah, with a couple vacations built in there. Exactly right.
Yeah, and so it's like, if I can get every day, I mean, today, Jason McIntyre and I today spent at least an hour on the WNBA, and it was a blast. We had all sorts of good debates, and when the show ends, we literally just get up and walk out at the same time. We don't sit around at all. And he goes, man, we had some good debates. And I'm like, that was a great June show. Waiting for the NBA. I'm like, that's as good as a June show is going to get for 3 hours. And I'm like, there were great debates. We talked stars and villains and rivals.